Hello and welcome back to another episode of Zero BS Estate Agency, the show that cuts through the industry noise and gets straight to what actually works. In this episode, I sit down with Adam Day, a name that needs no intro if you've been anywhere near the self-employed estate agency space in the last 5 years. Adam is not just part of EXP UK, he's been one of the driving forces behind its growth, culture and credibility. But this isn't a sales pitch for EXP, it's an honest conversation about why he made the move, what it really takes to succeed as a self-employed agent, and why most people misunderstand what this model actually offers. We cover the graft, the mindset, the emotional drivers like growing up watching his mum count the pennies, or losing his dad at a young age, and we talk about what it means to build a business that changes your life and the lives of others around you. So if you're thinking about going self-employed or just want to hear what makes one of the most respected figures in a estate agency tick, this episode is for you. So Adam, can you share what initially drew you to partner with EXP and how has it impacted your business approach?
Yeah, what initially drew me to EXP, I guess, if I'm being honest, I didn't have a job at the time, but I was doing consultancy and I hated doing the consultancy. So what actually drew me to it, I was going to start up a business called beltandbraces.com. So I'd been known as an online estate agent, hatched and, criticized for doing half the job, I suppose, is kind of what I was criticized for. And so I thought, well, beltandbraces.com sounds like a good name. It's a bit alternative. It doesn't sound like an estate agency business. And I'd set it up, and the whole premise around it was to have a national brand, national business, which I'd done before 2 or 3 times with Easy Property and Hatched and run eMove as well with Russell Quirk. But a high end, high fee, full service, very social media driven, very video driven. That was kind of my whole thing. And I'd also come across this thing called Workplace in my old role at Easy Property, which is like a collaboration. It's like a collaboration tool for workers. And so I'd had this big vision of, having a national brand with people being part of it. I'd thought employed. I'd never even considered self-employed. That wasn't a thing that I'd considered. And then EXP came along at about the same sort of time when I got the domain name. I still own the domain name. So if anyone wants to buy it, I paid £1,800 for that domain name. Now inflation, it's probably worth 2.5 grand now. I would have thought, but so I still own that domain name. I built a website. I joined Rightmove. I did everything. I was ready. I listed my first couple of houses. I was ready to go. And EXP had kind of in the background at the time. We were talking about it, and I'd been doing, let's say, consultancy, which I'd hated doing. And I just wanted to get back being an estate agent again and growing a business. I'm a business builder. I just love building businesses. That's what I like to do. And I think I'm pretty good at it as well. And so EXP came along and they said, well, we've got this model and, it'd be a national brand and we'll have Workplace. And I was like, Workplace? That's what I wanted to do. And then we'll do lots of videos. It'll be a social media. It's a personal branded estate agency business. I thought, why would I bother trying to start and scale my business, Belt and Braces, when, I had a bit of cash I could put into it, but nowhere near the funds that EXP could. And then the opportunity to grow a business with no risk, really, as the way I saw it with EXP, was too good to turn down, really. And ultimately, and ironically, that's what EXP does with estate agents. EXP de-risks the agent from all those costs and startups. And now I don't own EXP, right? I don't own EXP UK. A lot of people think I do. I don't own the license to it. I don't own the franchise, master franchise. It's not a franchise business. I am employed by EXP World UK Limited. And so I'm staff and I have no upside. I'm not going to sell EXP at some point in the future. I'm not going to look for a big exit because I don't own any part of EXP UK. So yeah, that was the downside for me, really. But then the revenue share was kind of the thing that really got me interested in what could that look like in 5 years' time. And we're now 5 years on. So I've got a good idea of what that does look like. It's pretty crazy. So I made the right decision, put it that way. Definitely.
Yeah, 100%. But what is it that really, I mean, suppose this question's two-part. Your enjoyment for estate agency, why, number one, and why also why are you a visionary? What is that passion?
What? I mean, the day I walked into Country Properties with my old boss Dave and Paul, I was like, this is for me. And I didn't know what this was even, but I walked in and Dave was full of beans and Paul was super sharp and focused but they had a bit of fun as well. They were swearers and I mean, today you couldn't get away with some of the stuff they were doing, obviously, but it was buzzy. There was people coming in the office, you were giving out details, you were trying to sell stuff. I liked selling stuff. I'd always seen myself as a bit of a salesperson, but a relationship building salesperson is what I've always felt as myself, as I'm not a closer at all. I'm rubbish at that. So yeah, the day I joined, I loved it. But visionary is a very strong word, and thank you for pinning that one on me. I'm not sure I am, but I suppose I grew up in it. I grew up in that middle ground between there being no internet and there being in the internet. And so I fully appreciated manual stuff, adding bias to databases and all that kind of stuff. But I also saw the opportunity and potential with the internet when that came in. And, my old boss, Dave, was a visionary in his own right, really. We were the first in the town to get broad dial-up internet, whatever it was called at the time. We were the first to go on Rightmove. We were the first to have an email address. Like, he got me my first email address on hotmail.com. That was his doing. So the more excited he got about it, the more excited I got about the internet. I thought, surely there's a way to have online estate agency. And that was kind of, I think I was born and started work at the right time, basically. I started, I say, in 97 when there was no internet. It was all manual. And by the time 2000, 2001 came along, you got Rightmove just blowing up like that. So kind of gave me the idea of how we could maybe the future might look.
And EXP, I mean, really, it's had, I'd like to say, a phenomenal growth, but not just a phenomenal growth, but a growth with some really, really good and talented agents as well. Why do you think that is? I mean, why is that? Why has it seemed to have attracted incredible agents?
Um, the model itself attracts incredible agents. I think the early day, look, in the UK, we've seen lots of self-employed models start and I wouldn't say fail, but flounder. They've never had the success that perhaps when you look at it on paper. I remember when a certain American company came to the UK in 2014, and I sat on a panel session with the guy who was bringing it to the UK. I was representing Hatched, I think, at the time, and this guy was talking about 63-37 splits, and I'm sitting on stage with this guy thinking, "Oh my God, this is a good model." I was a bit I was a bit nervous because I thought this might take some of my good agents away from me. And B, actually, I was a bit jealous. I was like, why didn't this exist in 2006? I'd have done that rather than start my own business. And so, straw poll of one, our CEO in America calls it the straw poll of one. I'm a very average kind of bloke. I think I'm a very middle of the road kind of thinker. I probably think what most people are thinking. And so I was sitting there thinking, that sounds amazing. So, but they didn't get any social proof. They failed with the social proof because they decided to recruit anyone with a pulse. And that was a real big mistake because the UK has been crying out for this kind of model for decades, probably, really, in reality. And you've got all these amazing agents who have climbed a slippery pole to be managers and area managers and all that kind of stuff, when actually there has been an alternative for many years. Even Sean Newman's been doing self-employed since 2007, 8, whenever it was. So I felt like to get the quality agents, you needed to show success. Because I was a decent agent, but I was watching the American company in 2014 thinking, if all else fails, I'll join them, but let me keep an eye to see if it works. And I'm a bit of a business geek in terms of I look at the bell curve, the innovation of disruption, the innovation bell curve, I can't remember what it's called now, but Maloney's theory of the innovation. And you have the early adopters who are the first 2.5%, then the innovators, the first 2.5% of people, the early adopters, the next 10%, and then it goes into mass market. And that's when you see a product or a service, boom. And so I felt, and the only way you get into mass market is by showing social proof with the early adopters and the innovators. I often think about my flat screen TV, and Anthony, my mate, is an innovator. He bought a flat screen TV when they were just out, and I was watching it thinking, this will never work. I'm not buying a flat screen TV. Then Alan, my other mate, who bought one, I was like, he was an early adopter. I'm thinking, okay, maybe this flat screen TV thing does work. And eventually, I'm an early mass market adopter. As I say, middle of the road kind of guy. That's what I am. And so as being a business geek, I felt that it was really important that we got the innovators successful who would then attract the early adopters, who would then attract the early mass market. And that's, we're not even in early mass market yet, I don't think, for EXP or self-employed estate agency. But because the innovators were so good, the first few that we managed to get on board, it's attracted the likes of, well, the names are incredible. Some of the names are unbelievable. I won't name them because the people I don't name will get offended. But they know who they are. They're all incredible, to be fair. They've all taken the leap. Hats off to anyone who does it. Anyone who does it. I have the utmost respect for anyone who jumps in and tries. And some might not succeed, but man, if you put the work ethic in and you're consistent, then it's life changing. Really is.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you that. I mean, in your opinion, you've previously mentioned before, family life being very important. What advice would you give maybe to someone thinking about the self-employed industry as maybe a home for them? What advice would you give them to make sure that they're sort of striking that right balance between, because it is hard, right? To start, you're pushing water uphill and you're pushing it and pushing it and pushing it with zero guarantees. But of course, that can come with lots of sacrifices. But what would you advise someone who's thinking about doing the self-employed model?
That you're not going to have a work-life balance for the first 9 to 12 months. That's simply, if people are joining because they want to have a bit of time off in the summer, it's a beautiful day outside here today, and I want to sit in the garden. But it's graft. You've got to work at it, and you're probably going to work harder and see your family less for the first 12 months, is what I would say. But at the end of that period, if you have been putting the work in and you've been consistent, then you will be able to dictate your time a bit better. I don't think there'll ever be a time where, because you'll be working until 9 o'clock at night because there'll be buyers who phone you and want to view a property, and you've got to accept that that's going to happen. But the upside, you then go, okay, but I get my Saturday mornings back. I don't have to go into the office at 8:45 in the morning and open up. I can actually go and watch my son's football or my daughter's football or whatever it might be. That's the trade-off, I think. And you can dictate, you can take your kids to school, you can do all of that stuff. But I think the first 9 to 12 months, you ain't going to do any of that stuff. You can do even less with your family because it's hard work, it is hard graft. So yeah, I think it's really important people understand that it's not easy and that the first part is difficult, but it will come. It will come.
Yeah. So if you take, for example, Alex Pelosi Buchanan, so in his first year, he absolutely did everything you just said. He didn't have a life. It literally was, for him, it was all about property. But then you sort of fast forward to maybe somebody like Jack Terry, who I've also interviewed on this podcast, who now is, a few years in and absolutely crushing it beyond belief because of that work ethic that you mentioned. But what is it that makes, though, the best agents? Is it purely that relentless commitment and consistency, or would you say there's anything else?
I often think, I think there's a load of things. It is relentless consistency. There's no question about it. But how do you become relentlessly consistent? For me, and I say this a lot to people, and people will be bored of hearing me say this, but I think you've got to have a big why. I think your why has got to be so big, and not even so big that you don't want to be the size of Google, but so big for you. And now that why might be, I want my kids to grow up without having to worry about paying the bills, unlike my mum. I mean, and that's one of my whys is my mum used to sit there, every week totting up the food bills and saying, oh, we might be £10 short this week. It's just 30 years ago, obviously. I don't want my kids to be in that position, which is why I work so hard so that they're never going to see me totting up a food shopping bill to see if I can afford it or not. They were back in 2012 when I was running, when I was trying to build my business. But that was to get to the point where I am now, where I don't have to do that sort of thing anymore, which is a wonderful thing and gives you so many. Yeah, my kids are never going to see me do that. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Mm.
But I think I think having a big why is really important. So my biggest why is I lost my dad when I was one, and that was, and so he was like 34, 35. I don't even know what age he was. Like I've not really paid it much attention over the years, other than to think that, man, life's short. You could drop dead at 34, 35, and and I'm past that now. I'm 47, so if I drop dead today, I've done better than my dad. But that doesn't stop me from being relentlessly consistent because I want to make sure that I don't leave anything, at all behind in terms of the work that I've put in. Because he didn't have the chance to do that. He didn't have the chance to put all the work in because he dropped dead at 34. Man, that's probably stayed with me for my whole life in terms of you have to make the most of every day. You have to take every opportunity. You have to say yes to everything and make it up as you go along and just muddle through it, and hope for the best. But as long as you put the work in, you're probably going to be okay at the other end of it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you are right in terms of why. My why is purely because I want to protect people. And, in an industry that's notorious for saying things that sound nice, it doesn't matter whether a seller uses me or not. I just want them to understand that they have a choice, so they can see what that choice looks like. And one of the things I can't stand is injustice. And what that looks like is when it is, say, last night, I was up till 1 o'clock in the morning writing another book because I need to get it out this weekend. And the reason why was because it was like I get asked so many questions on my behind the scenes on my Instagram and on my TikToks from people seeking advice. And I'm like, right, let me put this into a book form and get it out there so they have a choice. So what that means is that when I'm tired, when I don't want to do my 100 burpees a day challenge, which I'm currently doing, John doesn't get a say. John doesn't get a say. John doesn't matter if John's tired. John has to make this work. And I love your point about tying it to your father, who 34, 35, whatever, that's so young. We're both the same age at 47, but how young are we? We're almost maybe halfway through our life, but your dad's life got cut short big time. And also seeing your mum as well. And I totally agree with that. And even, I reckon if somebody doesn't even have a why, make one up and
Yeah.
be delusional and believe it.
Absolutely, and I think my why has evolved, especially over the last 5 or 6 years. And kind of what you just said there's triggered me on that is protecting people. I think it's probably helping people. I think that what you're doing there by protecting people, that's your why. Is you're helping people to protect them. And I actually think, and again, this is probably culturally come down from America and being part of an American company. That was another reason I wanted to start with EXP because it was an American company, and I'm blown away by their mindset all the time. It's like we're going to take over the world, man. And there's us in the UK going, I'm going to take over little old Hitchin, and they're so I love their mindset, but their mindset also consists of how can I help you? Like, how can I help you to achieve the things you want to achieve? And then they celebrate that success, and that for me has become uh, wildly important to me to help others and help them with their business, help them with their revenue share, help them to be able to retire early, essentially, and or to not even to retire early, retire when they want, have a holiday home, move house, own a horse, whatever it might be. And again, we've got countless examples at EXP without it being a sales EXP sales pitch, where people have moved house, they've got their acres, they've got their horses, they've bought holiday homes in Spain. And that's mad to think that I've had a time. They've done the hard work, right? But I've had a little impact in that, and that by helping them, whether it's helping them to get on board, helping them with a bit of advice, helping them with, an instruction because I know someone and I've just referred it or whatever. Um, that probably gives me the greatest joy now is seeing others succeed through a little bit of help from me. Love it.
Yeah, and do you know what? To add to that, I was actually speaking to Lexi yesterday in Cambridge, and she couldn't stop singing your praises. And that, again, is not the only person I've spoken to within the EXP model. And before, obviously, so I'm like, I'm made up. I'm loving the fact that I'm part of this brand personally. But I've witnessed you turn up to a mini workshop, yeah, with, for example, Adam McKay. I've seen the way that you interact with people. I've listened to people that have been with EXP for a number of years and some people that have only been with EXP for a short amount of years. And they all sing your praises. It's yes, you are the leader of EXP within the UK, and of course, expanding into, say, for example, India as well, and other areas. But people will hang their hat on you and associate their reputation with you, and that's clearly obvious at the awards night that you put on in December. But what would you say? Because I have to ask you, right? What do you believe sets EXP apart from other agencies?
Other self-employed models, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, I think it's a number of things. The model is the best paying. I mean, there are other models that pay a higher percentage, but they don't have a cap, for example. So actually, for those high achievers that want to get up to 150K, 200K, they're not going to they're not going to continue to have to pay 20, 25, 30%, whatever the number is, with us because we cap it. So I think that's important. I think the multiple streams of revenue, I think that's really important. I think the equity, if you had Glenn Sanford on the podcast, he would say that the equity is the most important piece of the puzzle because it creates a culture of where everybody wants everyone else to win. If you're on my patch, we don't have patches, but if you're in Hitchin and we're up against each other, technically speaking, because we can be, and you list the property and sell it, then I'm still happy for you because if that improves the share price, I still win. So, being an owner, we're not building someone else's business. I think that's really important to understand, like, really important for people to understand who are looking at different business models is every single business model is looking to sell their business at some point in the future because they've got investors. Most of them have got investors, and those investors want to return their investment, and that's either to list it on the stock market or to sell it, trade sale or private equity or whatever. And that's then inevitably, and the founders will deny this, but inevitably the founders will then bank a load of cash and probably walk away. And so people joining those brokerages, if you want to call them that, will then be building someone else's future wealth for them to then walk away. And for that agent, where's that agent going to be left with? They're going to be left with maybe a corporate who owns it, and then maybe they're going to start getting managed, going to start getting targets and figures. And that for me is probably the key part is that I said earlier, I don't own EXP UK. I own shares because I own shares in the big company like everybody else. I have no opportunity to sell EXP UK in the future. I don't own it. So therefore, I will leave one day. Everyone leaves either in a box or by choice, or maybe someone else's choice. Who knows? But I'm kind of locked in. I'm locked in. Again, because of the revenue share. So the third stream of income, the third reason why I think it's important is the revenue share, where you this is why our retention's so high, is because you bring agents in. I was talking to a guy called Jason, or was talking to Olivia, and one of my colleagues, and she'd been talking to Jason. And he's brought over 6 or 7 agents into his revenue share group, as we call it. He now earns enough money to pay for his mortgage and all his bills every month. He's never going to walk away from EXP, ever. Now, he's not the highest producing agent in the world, and he'll happily admit that. He's happy to just go along and do 40, 50K a year. Absolutely satisfied with that. He could do more. I know he could do more, but he's really happy in a really happy place. But he's never going to leave. Whereas, either the top agents will leave because they're earning too much money, whereas it's difficult for them to do that with the EXP because they own shares and they own revenue. They're earning revenue share. So I think that the model, I'd like to take a little bit of credit, but again, I've learned that from Glenn. I'm super accessible. You go to a conference in America, and Glenn will be wandering around, and you can shout Glenn, and he'll come over and talk to you. And this is a billionaire founder of EXP that doesn't need to work another day in his life. And neither do his kids, his grandkids, his great-grandkids, his great-great-grandkids, ever. And he still turns up to these events. He still mingles with the people. He's socially not the most, he would call himself an introvert, and you can tell that he is introvert, but he still puts himself out there. That's pretty crazy to think that an introverted leader of a billionaire is still happy to put himself out there. He could easily go into his shell and go and, go and enjoy life. But he doesn't. And I've learned that from Glenn, is you have to be accessible. You have to be present. You have to be willing to help, even with the smallest things. And back in the old days, I'd have thought, I'm above that now. I don't need to deal with that shit. I'm above dealing with people's, how to win an instruction kind of thing, or should I send a letter every week kind of thing. I mean, I got a message from a guy a couple of days ago who's just started saying, I loved your video about touting. Can I have a quick call with you about how often I should send letters, or should I send the letters without an envelope? That was right. And so I called him back. We haven't connected yet. He didn't answer, but I called him to talk him through, because I think, again, 10 years ago, I'd have just ignored that.
Mm.
Gone, nah, not my job. So I like to think I've had a little impact, but I think the model has the biggest impact.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Adam Day, EXP, thank you so much for coming on this podcast and talking to us about. It's always wonderful to actually get the inside track. So to get it from the leader in the UK and other areas across the world, that's absolutely amazing.
No problem at all. Enjoyed it.
And that's it for this episode of Zero BS Estate Agency. Massive thanks to Adam Day for showing up with raw honesty and sharing not just the wins, but also the real effort, sacrifice and mindset behind them. If you're chasing freedom, consistency and a life on your terms, rewind this episode. Listen again, there's gold in there, especially around why your why matters more than any marketing tip or commission split ever will. As always, this show is for agents who want to raise the bar, not just for themselves, but for the whole industry. If this episode hit home, do me a favour, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you're ready to level up your own agency game, check out the show notes for more tools, content and hard-earned insights. I'm John Savage and see you next week for another episode of Zero BS Estate Agency. Conversations that actually moves the needle. Until then, keep it real and keep raising the standard.